Welcome back to the Little Girl Podcast. I'm Kyra. All right, I'm excited to welcome Pastor Kenneth to the show. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes. All right, so we're going to go ahead and dive in because we got a meaty one today. But I'm going to have you start by telling the audience listening or watching who you are and what you do.
Kenneth Young. I am a son of the South, born and raised in Georgia, Southwest Georgia, later moved to Macon. I am Associate Director of Massachusetts Council of Churches. We serve 18 different denominations across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Right now, the key holder of a grant that's particularly serving Black clergy across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So I have a cohort right now, about 20 different pastors that we're working together on Black preaching and studying that. But the grant that we were awarded was $1.25 million to do this study for the next 5 years.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, so let me start by asking you, did you always know that you wanted to serve in ministry? And how did you recognize that calling?
No, I wanted to be a band director. Yeah, that was my love. I still have a love for music, of course. Through prayer, I felt God really shifting me and some closed doors. So that was the other part to that too. It's like, okay, God, you clearly you don't want me to do this. And so here I am with a yielded life, definitely fighting, but glad to have yielded myself to do this work.
Awesome. And one thing I'm going to say is that I really appreciate that you said in order for you to walk in your purpose, there had to be some doors that was closed. And
Yes.
and we obviously a lot of the listeners, watchers of the show are people who are either professionals, but a lot of people are entrepreneurs and they want to step out and they want to do things. But most often, no matter what you do, it's people who want to walk in their purpose. And so I think a lot of times when doors are closing, and especially for those of us who are people of faith, I mean, you're like, but wait, God,
Yeah.
I've been praying about this. But isn't it so delightful when he closes the doors and then you get to that place of realizing what he had that was so much better for you?
Exactly. Of course, we have dreams and visions and goals, which is great. I mean, I think you should write it down, take a picture of it, carry it with you, but at the same time, leave room for God to shift you in certain directions because God's way is always the best. And that's what I've experienced. Some no's down the road, you're like, thank you, God, for saying no, because that could have been catastrophic.
Right?
And so I'm just going to walk with this until you say yes to what I want you to say yes to.
Exactly, because there's
Yeah.
so many times where I'm like, "Oh, I'm so glad you closed that door." I mean, was mad in the moment,
Exactly.
and mad, cried, and everything. But maybe like so, and it's so amazing when it's like literally maybe like a month later that you see why the door was closed. And I was like, "Oh wow, I'm glad I didn't end up in that mess."
Yeah. No, most
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah.
All right. So, as I mentioned to those of you who are listening on the audio, when I gave the introduction, so Pastor Kenneth here is my cousin, and we were talking right before Christmas. So, this conversation we're having was really a spinoff of like an expanded convo, I should say, of something we started back in December. And I'm really glad because I feel like just with everything. When we're recording this is now February
Yes.
and it has literally felt like I have already lived a whole like half year. And I think one of the things that came from our pre-conversation and really sort of coming into this year was, and also something that my pastor spoke about at church at the beginning of the year was, how do we remain unshakable in the midst of everything that's happening around us? So I want to start by asking you, also as a man of faith and a pastor, when you hear the word unshakable, what do you think of?
Resilience. And I know that has kind of been a catchphrase for the last few years, like Black is resilience, or Black people are resilient, or I'm resilient, or I'm leaning on my resilience. And while we don't want to be, I think we have to be. And we all have to find our own foundation. Mine happens to be rooted and grounded in God, which helps me to be resilient regardless of what's going on around me, and understanding that God is indeed my foundation. God won't let me fall.
Right. Yeah, I think that's really important. And I do, even from like a time of being from working and coming up in my career, it was like always a word that traveled with me, no matter like what organization I was in, like who my manager was. They were like, "You're just very resilient." And I was like, yeah, I really don't know any other way to be other than to like, you have to press and keep moving. Like, I mean, I can't get bogged down in like the things of life or how I think I'm being treated or if something's not going like the way I expect it to go. Like, I just have to say, I have to keep my focus and maintain. And so I think, especially now, so if we just look at it, right, we've come into a year where a lot of people feel stressed, a lot of people feel scared, a lot of people feel uncertain. I mean, we have already experienced in such a very short time attacks on rights, freedoms, wildfires,
Mhm.
just politics in itself. And
Mhm.
just then you add on top of that just everyday life.
Mhm.
And I would like to ask you, what do you think people can do? One, to really look to maintain, like how can we maintain our focus on like the things that truly matter?
Yeah, I think this may sound strange, but you have to have like centering moments. And so that's something that I'm definitely trying to focus on every morning is
Yeah.
centering myself and not like waking up and like, okay, let me do the email or let me text back or let me, oh, somebody called me, somebody emailed me overnight or, but
Mm-hmm.
really having centering moments. And when I say that, that's meditating. That's what you do, daily devotional, just kind of shape and start your day and saying, you know what, whatever it is, now I know God is with me. And think that, at least for me, has been helpful to try to guide me throughout this whole process.
Mm-hmm.
The next thing I would say is, and take it slow. One thing I miss about being back home, and when I do get a chance to go home, everything is slower. It may get on some people's nerves, like, but when I'm up here, I'm in the city. My office is in downtown Boston. Everything is fast. People are trying to get to where they need to get to. People don't really speak to each other. All of those things, and when you're doing that, you kind of lose the present, which
Mm-hmm.
is the day that God has given you. And with all that is happening, I think we have to take that in, right?
Yeah.
Take
Yeah.
in the sun, take in the greenery. We have to take
Mm-hmm.
it because it's a lot that's going on. I mean, we are in prayer for those who lost their life in
Mm-hmm.
that plane crash.
Yeah.
But how many times have we hopped on in our planes? It's like,
Right.
okay, you text your loved one, like, I got to get off the phone now because I got to, and I
Mm-hmm.
call you when I land. And I'm sure some people had that same conversation, but they
Right.
didn't land.
Right.
And
Right.
so, at least for me, it's like, help me not take life for granted.
Mm-hmm.
And not that something catastrophic and tragic has to happen like that, but who knows? Your
Right.
body could just falter and you don't have the strength that you thought you were going to have for the
Mm-hmm.
next 30, 40 years. Enjoy life as much as you can because you don't know what tomorrow may hold.
Right. I definitely I agree with you. And I think something I love what you said about just having those centering moments. And I think there's even something to like the night before. Like I try to already say like tomorrow's going to bring this. So as I go to sleep, like this is how I want my day to go tomorrow. All
Mm.
right, Lord, you hear me? Like this what we doing tomorrow. But I think like you said, the getting up in the morning and I will say something about even you're right about our hometown. When you go there, it's just like it's just chill. Where am I? You almost get lost in the fact of it being so slow and just so chill. I think what I've tried to do over definitely over the last 4 years is create that in my own home. And
Mm.
obviously like the pandemic did it. See, I'm still one of those people. I never fully went back to like my life before the
Mhm.
pandemic. And obviously it really helps because I work from home. So I have created just everything in my home to make me feel like, yeah, like, I picked up hobbies that, yes, I thought I would never, like, I grew up doing puzzles. People hear me talk about puzzles all the time. I grew up doing puzzles and I hadn't touched a puzzle in years until like 2020.
Wow.
And then I started doing puzzles again, and I have not stopped doing puzzles. I mean,
Wow.
like I'm putting puzzles together, I'm putting together crafts. Like I'm doing all these things that just stimulate my mind, but they're
Mhm.
like things I can do in my home and I still feel like fulfilled by them. And it
Mhm.
just allows, like I will tell y'all if out there listening, watching, get a puzzle. Get a puzzle. It will stimulate your brain. It will, it's just, it's a relaxing moment. And it's not something, because for a while, it was like I wanted my husband to do it with me. I was like, come on, do this puzzle with me. Do this puzzle. He was like, girl, I don't like no puzzles. It's just like, he was like, I don't really like the act of like trying to find the pieces. And
Mhm.
so, and I was, and, and then, but it was okay because like God showed me like, it's okay for you to have this thing for you.
Mhm.
Like this is your thing. And like me putting together my little book nooks and my little crafts, like I do those and he'll come in and look but it's like I'll put my headphones on, I'll put some music on or some like a podcast and I'm like going to town and I will be in there for hours. So it's like you have to almost like find these things that bring you it's joy,
Mhm.
finding these things that bring you joy in the midst of all the things. And so, like, I want y'all to understand it's like you still need to be informed. You still need
Mhm.
to know what's going on around you, but you still need to be able to just allot those times in that space for you to do things that ultimately bring you joy.
Mhm. No doubt.
Now, I think also too, how are we staying encouraged by in the midst of things that might be happening and remain in faith? Because as you mentioned before, we can use the doors closing
Mhm.
and just saying, but people might be out there now. And I'm just going to use something because this is like a real thing. The cost of food is
Mhm.
like creeping up again, and eggs specifically. And you see that and you're like, oh man, like I just wanted to get some eggs for $4. Now I
And
can't get eggs for $4. How can we remain like in our faith when things just don't feel like certain?
yeah, Paul says like I learned to be a base and learn to be abound, right? I know how to live with a lot and I
Mhm.
know how to live with little. And I guess for me, like I kind of lean in and I'm doing this more now. It's like leaning in on my ancestors, right? I was in DC with a group of other leaders, and one that was leading the group was he asked the question like, "Who are you gonna put on today?" And my response was like John Lewis. He's always been one of my heroes. But I think that's what we have to ask ourselves. Like, who are we putting on today? Especially if your grandmother or your granddad or your great grandparents, you're going to have to put some of that on, right? That sense
Mhm.
of resilience. Like some of them lived through the Great Depression, or if they're
Mhm.
from the South, they've already gone through Jim Crow. Like if you had that conversation with them, they were able to tell you, I had to go, my late grandmother, she would say I had to go to the alley to get food, or we
Mhm.
couldn't go here because of this. And it was like, how did you make it? Like we learned to deal with it and we had our own community. And so I think that's a part of it, putting that on. And when I say that, I mean all of it, whether it's the gospel music, whether it's the gospel preaching. And I think like Black music, at least for me, is a salve. And it has always been that, right?
Mhm.
Whether it's the rhythm and the blues or it's the gospel, it's inspirational things. Like the best music comes from that crushing place. Marvin Sapp's never would have made it. It wasn't because he was glad. It was coming
Right.
from a,
Yeah.
like it was
Yeah.
coming from a crushing place, a
Yeah.
place where he was really down and out, smoking Norfolk.
Mhm.
That saying, I need you now. Like all of those songs come from a place where it's not always good. And God uses these times to bring out some beauty to help
Mhm.
us when we are wounded. And so I think, now more than ever, it's the time to put that on because we're going to need it. We may need to
Yeah.
go back and read some autobiographies and see how people were
Mhm.
able to overcome some things because we're going through some times that may not be the same times, but some of that
Mhm.
stuff, if you know history, I'm a history person, I have a
Mhm.
master's in history. It's like, we've seen this before, here we
Right.
go
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a playbook for some of us to use.
And I think too, something you said even earlier was just like finding community and finding support and finding people who you can also lean into.
Yes.
And whether it's like your church, whether it's like a small group of friends or
Mhm.
club or something, but just like leaning into those people that you trust. And we're able to be vulnerable and open. I feel like now's the time more than ever for people to just have space, safe spaces where you can have open dialogue with people. I make a joke. It's not really a joke because like I've been doing this, but people laugh when I say it. Kept saying like in 2025, I'm not arguing with fools. Like I'm not arguing, I'm not debating, like I'm not doing any of that stuff with people. Like what I am doing is I'm leaning into people like who community and people who want to be support systems to each other. And if you can't find that immediately, I think like you said, like lean into your families, your ancestors, lean into like get a journal and write. Get a journal, write down your thoughts. Like you mentioned before, whatever it may be where your faith lies, what you believe in, if it is like meditating or something. Meditate was like one of the best things like I picked up during the pandemic. I was like, oh, who knew? Like
It's good for me.
exactly. Because it's like, who knew? Like, because we were always, like you said, you're always like in the hustle and bustle. And just like you mentioned, you're in the heart of the city. And I mean, I can only imagine, like when you were saying that, I was thinking to myself, oh my God, I'm so glad like I'm just not in that anymore of like being in the city, like where people, because you're right. I mean, people are not as always as friendly as you would like for them to be. And I think it's so funny because I always hear this like every time I travel from like Georgia and say we would go to New York when I was working at another old job. And they would say like all the people that would come from like Atlanta, they'd be speaking to people in the morning and like the true New Yorkers would be like,
what's wrong with you? Right.
like,
what do you want?
yeah, they'd be like, they're tourists.
Right.
No offense to my New York people, but I'm just saying, like, it was like they were like, I mean, why y'all in here? Why y'all so happy in the morning? Like, no, we're not doing that.
Right.
So yeah, you have to almost create your happy space.
And can I say this? When you talk about that, there's a study that's out. Dr. Vivek, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, Murthy, the Surgeon General, talks about the fact that it's an epidemic of loneliness in America and how it is harmful. And I will say, at least for men, sometimes we're not as open to connect with other men. So like men definitely have to figure it out, whether it's we're going to watch the Super Bowl together or those are connection points.
Yeah.
Because we need to be able to open up without feeling as if we are vulnerable or weak and all the things, right? Because sometimes we're just not as communicative as we probably should be.
Yeah.
And that is harmful when we get into our own self and not being able to articulate it. And so to your point about journaling, I don't think journaling is just for female. Like you really should be able to.
Yeah.
Yeah, you really need to write some stuff down sometimes before you say it out loud. And ruin everything, right?
You can't just say everything out loud? I mean,
no, you can't do that. No, I'm saying all that to say, I think sometimes we have put these journal, that's what women do. And I think, or having these small groups where we just talk. I think we, as men, we have to figure out how to communicate well because we are better people to be around and more productive when we figure out, okay, this person is feeling like this too, or they're in a relationship and they're trying to figure it out too. Because we put on this cloak of we have to know how to do it all and have to be strong at it, and we can't break down and we can't cry. And I think,
or feelings are for women, like women, feelings are only for women. So I can't be out here in the streets talking about how I feel.
Exactly. Yeah. So we got to figure out that space where we're able to do that, safe space to do that.
I'm really glad you brought that up because you are so right about loneliness. Because even though the world, and I've just seen it in a lot of places, I mean, you can almost sense it like when I do spend a lot of time on TikTok, and you can sense it in spaces like that where people are like, oh my gosh, like I found my people. Or you see TikToks where people are just like, I just want to be in the house. And then people are like, oh my God, me too. Like, I mean, I think while yes, the world reopened, and yes, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of people out there living life and doing things, going places, but there are a lot of people who couldn't quite shift back, or it's not that they couldn't, a lot of people just didn't want to. And you're right, those are the people who feel like I want some type of community. So they're trying to find it. And to your point, I see more women on there who are like, oh, I got my people, and they'll be having a whole conversation in the comments. And but you're right, to your point, where for men it doesn't necessarily work that way.
You're spot on. I think, you know, people acting like, what do you miss about the South? And I was like, community. You think about the football games or the basketball games, like that's the place where we're gonna come together, even if we don't really like each other like that. You know, that's my school. You know what I'm saying?
Right, yeah.
And then when we leave here, we may not understand each other or be on the same page, but we can come together for this. I think that those are some touch points. We got to figure out where we can come together. And I would also say this too, like I think people, and in particular men, are trying to figure out like what to do now. Okay, we were far apart for a while, and now we're supposed to come together. But I'm used to kind of like working by myself now, and I already like to talk to people.
Right. Yeah.
So now what? You know what I'm saying?
I
So
think
now,
that that's more common. I think it's very common too with women as well. Like
right.
yeah, where people are just okay like being by and they are like, it's like you said, like they sort of long for a little bit for the community piece, but they're not really ready to step all the way into it. So it's like just trying to, as you mentioned, just trying to find these small ways of doing, like just small steps to finding your people, basically. Yeah, I mean, it's like it's out there, because I mean, I'm always amazed, like I said, if you're in little group, like I said, finding these people who like to craft, people who like to puzzle. I'm like, look at these people out here, like just they got craft groups that I didn't know about. And now I'm trying to get in on it. I'm like, can I get in on it virtually first?
Right. Let me see if I'm gonna like this.
Let me get in, let me get on the virtual level, and then we're gonna walk with it. No, I love that. So as we talk about this sense of resilience and remaining unshakable and just trying to stay focused to reach goals that we put into place, right? Because as we know, we're still in, let me go corporate for a minute, we're still in Q1. We're still in Q1, and people have goals and people are, trying to figure out how they can reach those. What would you say to people about just being able to truly stand in it and be unshakable, in the sense of like, I got these goals. I know we've talked about some things, but like if you were just like, if someone came up to you and they said, Pastor Kenneth, I've got this goal. I'm trying to do this thing this year, but woohoo, every turn, it feels like there's something blocking me. What are you saying to me?
Man, I'm pulling the card from Kirby Smart and from my great grandmother who lived to be over 100 years old. I asked a question of her one time. I was like, how did you come to be this old and still be in your right mind and all this other stuff, And she was like, baby, when I turned 40, I stopped worrying about things I could not change. And if I could change it, I just went ahead and changed it. I think Kirby Smart would say it like this: I only change the things that I can change, and the rest I don't worry about. So I think it's a place of where you put your energy. And I think for me, like that is one of my goals. Like, don't spend your energy on people or on things or on projects that is just not gonna change. And so if that you can change it, then that's where you put your time, your energy, so you can see some results. And it's not saying that it's gonna be easy, but you can get better each and every day at it, right? So what can I do to kind of knock some of this off? Or I guess the saying is, how do you eat an elephant? Is inch by inch. You got to start
really? I've never heard that, but okay.
Yeah. You got to start at it, right? You see someone, at least for me, I love art, not just music, but visual art as well. And we got a chance to go on a cruise, and they brought out this big old block of ice, and this guy was going to do this sculpture. And, it was beautiful at the end, but he had to keep chipping at it.
Right.
So like what is it?
Yeah.
What you want the end product, but you got to go through some stuff to get to the end. That means you got to chip at it every day in order for you to shape it, to mold it, to make it into what you want it to be. And so even if one day doesn't go the way you want it to go, keep chipping at it and keep shaping it until you end up seeing what you've already saw.
Oh, I love that. It's great advice. All right, look at us. I mean, we got some good. We covered some ground today.
Yeah.
We covered some ground today. I hope everyone listening or watching out there, like you've been able to take a little bit from something, grasp on, hold on to something from this conversation today. All right, so why don't you tell people who might be saying, "How do I find you? How can I connect to you?" Would you share, please?
Kenneth Young on Facebook. I am K Michael on Instagram and Thread. Yeah, I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Thread. I don't really do TikTok like that.
Yeah.
So I wasn't one of those ones like, oh no, I'm melting. I was
Oh,
like,
they
oh,
were the crash outs were real around
I know.
TikTok. I'm more there to consume. I mean, and like just yeah, but like the crashing out, I was like, I don't know what y'all crashing out for. You know it's gonna come back. Like, I mean, say you could
Yeah.
have, yeah, it was an interesting watch. But we'll drop all those links in the show notes. All right,
Yeah.
so now we're going to transition to three things with Pastor Kenneth. I'm gonna ask you three questions that helps
Okay.
our audience get to know you a little bit better. The first one is a two-part. It is how do you start and how do you end the day?
Oh, started with prayer on devotional, ended by trying to check some stuff off. I'm a big, like, I checked it off. It's
Yeah.
done.
Wait, will you write it down just to scratch it out if it wasn't something that was on the list?
I do have notepad where I've scratched stuff. I also do stuff in my phone. So I have the reminders on my iPhone where I'm able to hit it and it disappears. So it's good for me to be able to say, I've done it, and then be able to say, okay, here's what I need to do. So those are the two things that I try to do. In the
Okay.
morning, take my time. And I've learned this from Howard Thurman. I wasn't like I grew up in South Georgia in a Baptist church, meditating. But reading Howard Thurman, who's kind of helped me kind of tap into the kind of spiritual side, has helped me to help learn how to meditate and take those deep breaths, which is good for your body, your blood pressure, all of that. And then at the end to say, okay, here's what I actually did, so that I don't feel like I didn't accomplish anything today.
Right, right. All right. Number two is what is a goal or an intention that you set for yourself this year?
To be more disciplined. Yes. I had a scholar of mine to say to me, young clergy, you all are not disciplined with your time. You have too much going on not to be disciplined. So you need to schedule out your time. I'm working, like next week, I'm working to schedule out every bit of my day.
Okay.
And so hopefully it helped me be more disciplined with my time.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. And the last is where are you currently finding inspiration?
I'm a history person, so it's biographies. It's documentaries. I'm watching Dr. Henry Louis Gates' Great Migration right now. I've done episode 1 and 2 and just understanding resilience, how they were saying the South is crazy. So let's just move up north. And then when they got up north, it's like, oh, it's crazy up here too. But we here now. So when we got to figure it out. So I think like those things are helping me like find some type of balance and saying like we've been here, whether it's a great migration up north and then now they're saying a great migration back home down south. Either way it goes, it's feel like we Black people in particular are always trying to figure out how do we settle and how do we find peace? And in the midst of that, they've made home wherever it's been.
Awesome. That. All right. So before I let you go, I have to ask you one last question. What are three things you would like for the audience to take away from our conversation today?
3 things. You can be resilient. Figure out what's going to help you stand. The second thing I would say is find your people. I think we had that conversation. I thought that was really good. Everybody got somebody that you like. So if you're a lemonade person, find somebody else to like lemonade. If you're a Kool-Aid person, red, you find that person. You're a wings person, lemon pepper. There's somebody for everybody. I think we just need to find our people. And the third thing I would say is learn to know more about you. So like each and every day, you should be saying, okay, I like this about me, or here's the things I don't like about me. And then I can change it. No one says that you can't. So you can change those things. You're in control of that.
Awesome. I love those. Yes, find your community. Well, all right. So thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me anytime.
Yes, I
This is fun.
appreciate this conversation and it was so fun to like I said, we started it casually, and to be able to like bring it here to this platform has been very like awesome. So I want to say I hope that you achieve all the things that you're working towards, especially the discipline. I'm going to be asking you about that. Like, have you been like time scheduling your day? How's that going?
Yes.
Well, like I said, best of luck. I hope it's a great year for you. It's gonna be a great year. That's what I've been like playing. It's 2025. Like, this is the year. This is it for us. This is gonna be a great year. Everyone, remain unshakable and be resilient, and listen to these tips that Pastor Kenneth gave us today. So stay tuned, everyone. I'll be right back.